Download my free legato course right now and learn to play fast in the fastest way possible. It's 4 core exercises that you need to focus on in order to reach the highest level of mastery. And then I'm going to give you the 3 sub-skills of legato. Once you master these 3 little skills, then the overall skill of playing very fast runs using hammer-ons and pull-offs will be very easy. So go sign up right now and get immediate access for free. See you in the course. Previous video, we talked about how playing scale shapes endlessly up and down through the positions is really hurting you more than it's helping you. Today, we're going to look at a principle that's equally important. Actually, it can, shorten your learning process massively. You could say that the human brain is much like the CPU of a computer. It processes information, and it gets those information, or that information, from what we call the short-term memory. The short-term memory is a pool of information that you can load up, and once it's loaded, the CPU can start processing that information. But we need a place that's very fast to access, and that's why we have the short-term. It doesn't hold a lot of information, but it's very rapid. The brain can really access it rapidly. We also have the long-term memory, and that's really where we want our scale charts to be, right? We want them down there so we can remember them always. But the long-term memory is a huge place compared to the short-term memory, which is very small. But it's also a bit slower retrieving information from the long-term memory because we have to load that into the short-term memory first, and then the CPU can use it. You can also load the short-term, and here comes the point, you can also load the short-term memory from a source outside of yourself, like a piece of paper with scale charts on it. So let's say that you want to learn a scale chart. So you look in the book or the manual or whatever, and you look at the scale chart, and you try to figure out where to put your fingers. So you translate that piece of information into what's actually going on here. Once you have that pattern down, you can take the paper, throw it out, or leave it, and then you have loaded up your short-term memory, right? Because it's all in there. And now your computer can start using it, so you can start, using it for improvising with. But, point 1, right now, the learning has stopped. There's no more learning scale charts. You can use and you can play it up and down all day, all you want, for hours and hours. But it won't make you any better, really, because the learning process is the process of loading your short-term memory, because that takes up resources. It's expensive for the brain to have to look at the you can feel it when you do it, right? When you load up your short-term memory, it's kind of, you have to really use your brain there. And then once it's in there, it's easy, right? So that takes up energy. But it also takes up energy loading up the long-term memory even more. You have to get people together and scratch into that hard disk, because this is the ROM in a computer. This is the hard disk. We have to actually scratch the information, imprint it into a physical object, right? And so that takes up resources. And that's why the brain doesn't just go ahead and make everything long-term memory, right? It doesn't, everything we get in there, just bam, it goes down into the deep database. No. It has to qualify first. And when does it qualify? Well, if you load the same piece of freaking information into the short-term memory, enough times, eventually the brain goes, hey, this is not making any sense. Why don't we put it in the long-term memory so we don't have to spend 2 minutes retrieving it every time we need it? It's just a matter of not spending too many resources for the brain. So that is really the learning process. The brain isn't learning. The brain is just deciding when to put something in the long-term memory, right? And so for you to speed up this process massively, what you do is that you load the fretboard chart into your short-term memory. And once it's in there and you can play it comfortably all the way up and down, then you do everything in your power to forget it. Why? So you can load the short-term memory up again, because the more times we can do that, the more times we can have the trying to remember or seeing the fretboard chart on a piece of paper and then translating it to something here, the more times we can do that and empty it again, the likelier it is that the brain's going to go, hey, we don't want to use that kind of energy, let's put it in the long-term memory, where we can retrieve it instantly, because this might take you 2 minutes to do this, but this, going from the long-term memory, loading up the short-term memory, goes like this. It's almost instant, but it takes up a little bit of resources as well. But this is the process. And in the beginning, when I was practicing fretboard patterns, I was really just, I went by the principle of just practice them a lot, just play them a lot. And so I played them a lot. But what I should have done was the following. Here comes the recipe, really. Because you take one fretboard chart, let's say 1 6-note shape or 3-note shape, and then you learn that. And once it's comfortable, you can remember it as you sit there, then you quickly go on to another one. Right? Once that's comfortably in there, you can either go back to the first one, because you just loaded up your short-term memory, then emptied it by loading up something else. But you might just have room for both in there, right? And so it isn't really emptied yet. So you might have to introduce a third one. And so you really learn that. You look at the fretboard chart, you load it in there, right? And you become really comfortable with it. Really, so it's totally, okay, now you can do it. Now, chances are you've forgotten most of or some of the first pattern. So you go back to that again, right? And then you go back to number 2. Now you've been all the way through, back to 1, and now you've probably forgotten some of number 2 as well. And then you try everything you can to remember that shape, all you can, right? Because it's it's the resources you use trying to remember it that's going to convince the brain that it's a bad idea to have to load it all the time, right? So it puts it in a long-term memory. So, right? And you might have to introduce a fourth one. At some point, the first one is going to be easy, right? Why? Because it's in the long-term memory suddenly. When it stops disappearing from your memory, it's because it's down there, right? So when I was building my skills many years ago, or the majority of my skills, the fundamental parts of them, what I was doing is let's say, just a normal day, just a normal Monday, I was looking at a fretboard chart. I was loading that into my short-term memory. Once it was loaded, I might have practiced it, 2 or 3 hours. I might have two shapes or 3 shapes, but I was just practicing them over and over again, going up and down, back and forth, and I was learning absolutely nothing. So, other than technique and playing up and down. So I might have spent, 3 minutes loading them into my short-term memory, and then 3 hours practicing them. On the other hand, today, I would take a fretboard chart and I would perhaps spend 2 minutes loading it into my short-term memory, and then emptying again, using another 2 minutes, and so I would get, hundreds of learning experience a day of learning and scrambling and forgetting, and then back to learning again. And here, I would have 1. Right? So this is insane how much this can mean to you, how you work with yourself when you practice. So please do this. Fill up your short-term memory. The second you remember it, go on to something else. Go back to the first again. If that wasn't enough to scramble the first one, add another one and another one, right? And then turn the whole process upside down. Instead of being frustrated when you forget something, be frustrated when you remember something, because it's all about forgetting so you can reload it again. So every time you come across something that you've forgotten, be happy because, I get another chance to imprint it even deeper into the grooves of the hard disk, right? So this is the process. So please use this today, and then I'll see you in the next video.